Hello, hello, hello. This is our first live video on this site, and I'm Dr. Manon Fielding with Spiritual Empowerment for Women of a certain age who want more out of life. But really, this is for anyone. This particular talk is about us versus them, which is a really critical topic in today's world. And let me just introduce that. So, it's very common in society for us to put ourselves into different groups, right? Like you're born um, in a certain household with parents that grew up in a certain place, have a certain religion, um, race, sexual orientation. There's so many different factors that go into that. And we learn at a very early age what groups we're part of. And kids, especially young kids, are often can be very mean to each other when they feel they're in a certain group and someone else is an outsider. And that's where some bullying may take place and could be on social media or in school. And I really didn't learn that much about this until I was much older. So when I was in, when I was in my addiction counseling training, one of the things we had to do was really become more aware of what our biases were. And that is, so we're going to talk about the 5 steps to actually changing that. And instead of separating ourselves from others, how do we build bridges? And so the first step is awareness. So, like I was saying, when I was in a counseling program, we had to really look inside and determine. Some of them were very obvious that we may have biases against certain groups, and that could we overcome that in a counseling situation. And in some cases there were circumstances where some people felt like, if they were um, Christian counselors and they had someone come to them that were pregnant and were thinking about what they were going to do about the pregnancy, and they wanted to consider abortion and they wanted to consider their options, a Christian counselor might really not be able to handle that. That was an awareness that they had to come to. There may be certain situations that they feel maybe someone else would be better off helping you in that case. Or sexual orientation as another one. Some people are not comfortable talking about that, about homosexuality or being trans. And so it's very important in that kind of role to understand that. But it's really important in our daily lives because there's so much us versus them between states, between religions, between different countries that set themselves against each other. And if we can learn how to build that bridge, it becomes a very important thing for establishing peace in the world and being able to live together in harmony, right? So the awareness is the first step. So some things you're very aware of and you know what your biases are, and other ones you have to think a little bit more. So some examples that I had, if I really thought about it when I was in this counseling program, if I was being approached by someone of color or approached by a white man that looked more like me, I would immediately have more of a fear of the colored person, which is really kind of ridiculous because most of the serial murderers were white men. So some of our biases are just things that we learned at a very early age, and you really have to think more deeply sometimes to understand what those biases are and where they came from. Like if you have a bias against a particular religion, or you have a bias against homosexuality. Where did that come from? Did you learn it from your family? Was it because it was in the Bible and that's what they drummed into your head? And really consider, why do I believe that? And is that really true? Is that something I really want to hold on to? And that's step number one, the awareness, okay? Step number two is blurring the lines. And what that means is that many of us are not rigidly in a certain group. Even many people who are practice a certain religion may have grown up in a multi-religious home or experience multi-religion. So your father may be from one religion, your mother may be for another, and they may brought you up in a certain one of those, but you really had some experience with both. So that's kind of what I'm talking about, blurring the lines. Another example would be multiracial families where black, white, or all kinds of mixed colors. I mean, in a lot of societies, there's so much hybrid, and it really just blows my mind sometimes that people are still so biased and discriminating when they are probably mixed themselves somewhere in their history. You know, they may not even realize it, but they may be, a hybrid themselves. I mean, that's happened so many times. I remember seeing a movie about, and this is happened many times, but where a white family had a black child. I think that was in Australia or New Zealand, and they were so outcasted, and a lot of people didn't believe that she was really the child of this couple, and faced so much discrimination, and she actually moved to another country because of that. Another example is I was watching one about in South Africa. This boy was born an albino from a black family, and the father completely disowned him. It's like, this is not my child. I could not have had this child. But, truly, that's because of that hybrid blurring of the lines and not accepting that we are all, not all of us, but a lot of us are mixed in different religions, different races, etc. Okay, so that's one of the things that is how to blur the lines. The third step is looking for similarities. So what are things that you can look at another person from another group, so to speak, and what do you have in common with them? Sociologists tell us that the reason that we group ourselves is out of fear, and it was just something kind of instinctual, but we can actually learn how to change that. And when we look at things that are common between us, then we can develop empathy for that person. So one example was a group that went to go visit people who worked in the mines. We were trying to get away from coal, and the families that were very invested in mining coal, that's all they knew. And when this group went to visit with them and learn about their life and why they were so set of keeping that lifestyle, they kind of realized that, they might have felt the same way in that situation. That, if that's how you grew up and that was what your family did, and that is all of a sudden being taken away from you, then you can start feeling empathy and help bring better solutions between the groups. And if you all can understand each other better, and that can happen between any groups. What are the things you have in common? So I'd be very interested, if you can post that in the comments of situations that you've experienced that you might have found commonalities in a group that you were actually kind of surprised that you did. So that's number 3. Number 4 is getting in tune with yourself. and really understanding your own biases. And a lot of times I used to think that I wasn't biased. I grew up in on Long Island in Jericho, New York, and I had no one of color in my school. All my friends were either Jewish or Catholic, so not even full range of Christianity. Most of them were one of those two. So when my family moved to Charlotte, um, it was a whole different world, right? I mean, the schools were integrated, and I started, I didn't feel that I was prejudiced, but I I didn't really know because I hadn't even had the experience. And when I went to college, I actually started a relationship with a man who was black, brought him home, and oh my God, you saw that movie where she brought a black person home. So I went through that, and it was, looking back on it, it's kind of funny, but we don't really even, it's just something that you have to tune into and really see where you're coming from and be honest with yourself about the reasons. And sometimes we can get over it and sometimes we can't, but as long as we're aware of it, it helps us bridge that gap between the two groups. Okay, so that is number 4. And by the way, I would like, in the comments, if you can leave some comments about things that you grew up with that you have overcome and things that you've changed in terms of your own biases. I'd really be interested in hearing about that because it's very important for us to start talking about the subject. Number 5 is being intentional, and that is making a conscious effort to change that mentality. And if you know that somebody is in your life who falls into the category that's been discriminated against, try to include them. I mean, I've heard a lot of stories from people talking about someone who was kind of outcast, and they were brought into a group to made to feel like they were part of, especially, like, for instance, someone new in the area, somebody new in school. The person who reaches out and whose family teaches them how to do that can make such a big difference in someone's life. I mean, feeling like the outcast is one of the worst feelings, especially when you're younger and you don't have that sense of confidence, you don't feel like you belong. And I'm sure all of us have had some experience where we felt like we didn't belong. So we understand what that feels like. So try to be inclusive when you notice that that's happening with someone else. Like, if you also, like, on social media, if you see discriminating or discriminatory posts, write a comment, like, call them out on it. It's not right to let that go. We just have to be very assertive about our intentions to get rid of the barriers between us. It's great to celebrate who we are. So don't think that I'm saying that we shouldn't celebrate if you're Jewish and you want to celebrate and you're celebrating your religion. We should be proud of who we are, but we should also be proud to be part of the human race and that we all have commonalities, and allow everyone to celebrate their own group and who they are without hurting the other. So that's really the 5 steps. Let me review that before we close. So we have awareness is number 1. 2 is blurring the lines between the groups and recognizing that we are all hybrids of some sort in groups. We're not as divided as we think. The 3rd one is looking for similarities between us rather than the differences. The 4th one was getting in tune with yourself and really looking inside, and not only looking at the most outward discriminations or things that you have built in, but some of the ones that are maybe more hidden. And like an example would be if someone came into your um, environment and all of a sudden you have this thought, ooh, like stay away from me because of something. Like you have a reaction, but you don't really know why. And you start to realize, well, maybe that was a bias. That wasn't really that. We're not really looking at that person as an individual. We're looking at them because of their color, their size, their height, their weight, whatever it is, that we might have had an instant reaction, and that maybe we can be more aware of it. So that's getting in tune with ourselves. And the fifth one is being intentional, like making assertive steps to blur those lines and boundaries between us. So I really appreciate you being part of this today. I think, since I didn't really advertise it, most of you are going to see this after the fact. But if you could comment any experiences that you have about this subject, I really appreciate it. And I've enjoyed being here. Like I said, I'm Dr. Manon Fielding. I'm a spiritual life coach, and I love working with women that are really stuck in their lives and want more out of it and are trying to overcome being stuck. They're anxious, fearful, various things that happen as we've been through trauma, abuse, a loved one's addiction are some of the major things that happen. And maybe you're an empty nester and you don't know where to go from here. That coaching is really what empowered me to change my life and go back to school and change my career and get involved in helping people at in my age when a lot of people are retiring and retired. I'm just not ready to do that. So thank you for listening today, and I look forward to meeting you. And I think you can see Jackson is in the class today, my Aussie Doodle, actually my daughter's dog. All right, thanks a lot. We'll see you soon. Bye-bye.